Sentire Media.
Welcome to the Stop Italian Sounding podcast, uncovering authentic Italian food. I'm your host, Robert Campana, and join me as we delve into the rich heritage of genuine Italian food, exploring its legends, history, and traditions. Through important tips and insightful interviews with industry professionals, you'll gain a deeper understanding of authentic Italian food. Welcome back, everyone, to the Stop Italian Sounding show, uncovering authentic Italian food. So for today's show, we're going to briefly delve into the world of Italian wine. Italian wine tends to be one of the most famous types of wines around the world, along with wine, of course, from France, wine from Napa Valley in California, Spanish wine. But today, of course, we're going to focus on Italian wine, obviously. And I want to specifically talk about the labeling of Italian wine, or I should say maybe the classification of Italian wine, because when we purchase Italian wine, we always look for the words, of course, product of Italy. But then we often see little labels on the neck of the bottle. And I want to kind of talk about what those labels are and maybe give a few examples of wines that pertain to those specific labels and those classifications. But before I get into that, I was thinking the other day, because I was sitting down having dinner and I poured myself a glass of wine. I was drinking Chianti and I was looking at the bottle and I saw the date 17 something. I forget the exact date that it was. And I thought to myself, wow, a wine from the 1700s. So I should say the history of this wine from the 1700s, which is just incredible in my opinion. And what is one thing that Italian wine has, or I should say, what is one of many added values that Italian food products have? And that's the added value of history, of tradition, of tradition that has been around for many centuries in that case. So one could think New World wine, which wine from Napa Valley, California. There are many great wineries and wines that do come from the New World wine, if you will. But they don't have that specific added value of centuries old history. And I think that plays a huge role, because you're not just consuming wine, you are consuming an entire story, an entire history, and entire set of tradition as well. So I just wanted to point that out because, again, it was something that I noticed on the neck of the bottle of the wine that I was drinking the other day. So anyway, let's delve into it. So when it comes to the classification of Italian wines, I often think of it as a pyramid. And the bottom of the pyramid starts with the vino da tavola wines. So maybe not the most strictly produced types of wines, the wines that tend to be less quality wines, even though you could get wines that are quote unquote vino da tavola that you really like, because obviously opinion is just that, it's your personal taste. So vino da tavola means that it is a table wine, and it's the simplest form of classification for Italian wines. So these wines aren't tied to any strict geographical regions or group, or I should say grape varietal requirements. And labels can include the grape variety or region of origin, and they're just typically made for everyday drinking. And the focus is on producing large quantities rather than high quality artisanal wine. So some characteristics, of course, are that they are quite affordable. Um, they're often made from local grapes or blends of multiple varietals. And they have simple flavor profiles and are usually consumed at a young age, so not too aged. And examples could be generic rosso wines or red wines, generic bianco wines or white wines. So typically, if you're sitting at a trattoria in Italy or a restaurant or an osteria, and you get a house wine, they tend to be vini da tavola, and they're often used, of course, in that regard. But also many times when you go to somebody's house, especially in southern Italy, I could just think of my family in southern Italy that drink table wine, so vino da tavola, because they produce it themselves. Anyway, moving up the pyramid tends to get a little more small as we make our way up. The next classification are the IGT wines, or the Indicazione Geografica Tipica wines. And these are wines, or this is a classification of wines that was introduced in the 90s, and these wines allow winemakers, let's just say, greater freedom to experiment with non-traditional grape varietals and blends. And this classification blends the gap between generic table wines and the more regulated DOC or DOCG wines, which I'll talk about in a minute. And if we talk about the characteristics of these IGT wines, they're labeled, of course, with the geographic area of production, such as I could think of Toscana IGT, and includes innovative blends or indigenous and international grapes blended together. And the flexibility in the production of these types of wines allow, obviously, for creativity in producing the wines, because the regulations for creating these wines and producing these wines are not as strict as the next two that I'll talk about. And some examples that we uh, could think of specifically are Super Tuscans, for example, Tignanello. And these Super Tuscans are premium wines, believe it or not, that broke the quote unquote traditional DOC rules, which I'm going to talk about in a second, by blending the Sangiovese with international varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon or Merlot. And just because it's rated an IGT wine doesn't mean that is not of good quality, because IGT wines could be of amazing quality. Another wine that I could think of that I tend to like is a Primitivo di Puglia IGT. It's more of a rich, red, fruity wine from southern Italy in Puglia. And then another example of these types of wines are Veneto IGT. So it often includes Pinot Grigio or a unique blend of local white grapes. So as we work our way up the pyramid, we have the next classification of Italian wines, which is the DOC classification, which stands for Denominazione di Origine Controllata. So if I were to translate it to English, it would be controlled designation of origin. So DOC wines, and it's clearly labeled on the neck of the bottle. These types of wines are produced within specific geographic areas under very strict regulations. And these rules dictate what grape varieties can actually be used in that wine. It also dictates the maximum yields, the aging requirements, and other things as well. And the goal is to ensure that the wine reflects the traditional characteristics of that specific region. So now we're talking about very strict regulations, production regulations. And the characteristics of these wines are that they represent the specific terroir of that wine, the specific tradition of that wine, the specific history of that wine. And they tend to be higher quality than IGT, not always, but they tend to be, but less restrictive than the next type of wines that I'm going to talk about, which are the DOCG wines. And for DOC wines, these labels often include, obviously, the region and the grape variety when you look at the bottle of wine that you purchase. Some examples could be Chianti DOC from Tuscany, which tends to be a very popular wine here in the United States. It's a medium body red wine made primarily from Sangiovese. We could think of wines such as Prosecco DOC from Veneto. Prosecco, the light sparkling white wine made from the Glera grapes. We have something like Barbera d'Alba DOC from Piemonte in northern Italy, more of a fruity, low tannin red from Barbera grapes. And then we have another one such as Orvieto DOC from Umbria, which characteristically speaking tends to be more crisp, floral, if you will, white wine made from the Gricchetto and the Trebbiano grapes. Now, finally, we're going to move to the pinnacle of the pyramid, of the Italian wine classification pyramid, which is the DOCG classification, or the acronym that stands for Denominazione di Origine Controllata e Garantita. So now we have guaranteed control designation of origin, if I were to translate it to English. And DOCG wines is indeed the highest and most prestigious classification for Italian wines. And it builds on the DOC rules, but adds stricter quality controls, including taste testing by a governmental panel, the Italian governmental panel, I should say. And each DOCG wine has a unique numbered seal on the neck of the bottle. So obviously everything is traceable as well. And we're talking about extremely strict rules to ensure consistent quality. Now, just because it's a DOCG wine doesn't mean that you're going to like the wine, because obviously your personal taste is just that. It's your personal taste. It's your opinion. However, like I said, there is more consistent quality across the board with this wine. We're talking about limited production areas that reflect unique terroirs within Italy. And they're often age-worthy wines, not always, but often age-worthy wines with complex flavor profiles. And a few examples that I could think of course, I have to say the king of wines, which is Barolo DOCG from Piemonte in northern Italy, made with 100% Nebbiolo grapes. It's a very powerful red wine that is often better with age. In fact, I have one sitting in my kitchen that's about 10 years old, so I should drink it. Another one I could think of is Brunello di Montalcino DOCG from Tuscany, a very rich wine, structured Sangiovese wine aged for years before, obviously, it is released to the market. Another wine that's DOCG is the Amarone della Valpolicella from Veneto. It's a full-bodied red wine which is made using dried grapes for the concentrated flavors of that specific wine. And then we have another DOCG wine that is not red, and it happens to be one of my favorites, which is Franciacorta from Lombardy in northern Italy. It's a luxurious, if you will, sparkling wine that's made using the traditional method. So anyway, there are many DOCG wines out there that one could purchase. So that being said, these are the classifications of the Italian wines that you could find. Now, if you're in a wine shop or a liquor store, you probably won't find table wines in there. I don't ever recall finding Vini da Tavola. I mainly see wines that are IGT wines, which I spoke about a few minutes ago, DOC wines and DOCG wines. And obviously you purchase what you specifically like. Just because it has one classification over the other doesn't mean that it is better. Like, you have to get what you like. However, the point of today's episode was to explain the classification system, which helps people who like wine navigate Italy's vast variety of wines, offering options for every taste and obviously every budget, of course, because the prices greatly vary. So this is the world of wine in Italy when it comes to the classification system. So next time you do pick up a bottle of Italian wine, read the fine print, look at the labels, so you know exactly what you're getting. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the stories of authentic Italian cuisine. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more insights and interviews. Also, feel free to reach out with your thoughts or questions on our social media channels at Stop Italian Sounding or on our website, stopitasounding.com. Grazie a tutti e alla prossima.
Sentire Media.
Hey, podcast producers and show hosts. Do you want to join a podcast network that celebrates all things Italian? At Sentire Media, we understand the allure of Italy and its unique culture. Our devoted team of hosts and producers are all driven by their shared passion for Italy. And we work tirelessly to create the best lifestyle podcasts and content that will whisk you away to the very heart of Italy. With us, you can savor the mouth-watering flavors, get lost in the stories from the past, break down the cultural barriers, and truly immerse yourself in the vibrant traditions of this intoxicating country. If you have a great podcast idea or are already in production and would like to join Sentire Media, head over to sentiremedia.com, that's SENTIRE media.com, and find out how to submit your show.